Today's video is sponsored by Nobility.co.uk, the leading company in selling legal titles in the United Kingdom. Get a 10% discount in any purchase by mentioning Death Row. Jedidiah Isaac Murphy's background was traumatic. Born in Sonora, southeast of Dallas, on September 1, 1975. He spent his early years in terror of his father, a violent alcoholic who died in his early 40s, when Murphy was 8. On numerous occasions, he witnessed him beating his mother mercilessly. When Murphy was 3 or 4, court records say, his mother, unable to take any more, fled the family home. He lived for a while with his grandparents, a period he remembers with fondness, but after about a year, they both passed away. He spent the rest of his childhood in orphanages and foster homes. Originally named Jim Kynes, he was renamed Jedidiah Murphy by one of his foster families. In care, he witnessed and experienced further abuse, both physical and sexual, as noted by psychiatrists in a report on his condition drawn up in 1999, the year before he committed murder. By the time he was 13, he was isolated from what was left of his family and drinking heavily, stealing both alcohol and the money to buy it. Somehow, he managed to get through high school. But medical records show he emerged into adult life as a victim of dissociative identity disorder, which was formally diagnosed by psychiatrists in 1999, the year before his crime. Murphy was also plagued by vivid, psychotic hallucinations, with repeated visions that he was being attacked by snakes. He contemplated suicide and made at least one serious attempt, and was admitted to psychiatric hospitals multiple times. These are all the things Jedidiah Murphy experienced by the time he was just 13 years old, when most children are learning what foods they like or what their talents are. He was never treated for any of these things, and as a result, he did what many do that never get the help they need. He committed a horrific crime and ended up on Texas death row. Jedidiah was in and out of foster care and had been removed by the state from his first adoptive home due to abuse and violence, something that was common in Jedidiah's life. He had been subjected to it for as long as he can remember, and at the age of 13 he began drinking to self-medicate the trauma and his complex and debilitating mental disorder called dissociative identity. He never denied his role in the murder case, and he confessed because he never set out to harm anyone. He doesn't even remember the biggest details of the crime at all, due to his severe mental illness. He suffered blackouts from the ongoing trauma of abuse, neglect and abandonment. He was drugged during his trial, and would often sleep during parts of it, seemingly cold and indifferent, because he was incapable of normal emotion at all. He even attempted suicide during his trial. On October 4, 2000, in Garland, Murphy forced a 79-year-old Bertie Lee Cunningham to give him a ride at gunpoint. After riding for about 30 minutes, Murphy forced Bertie Lee Cunningham into the trunk of the car. The victim was shot while getting into the trunk. Murphy then drove the victim's car to Van Zandt County, where the victim was removed from the trunk and drowned in a creek. Murphy later used the victim's credit cards to purchase alcohol and cigarettes. Jedidiah Isaac Murphy was convicted in June 2001 of capital murder. Records from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice show the agency has stored pentobarbital at the Huntsville unit, located about 70 miles north of Houston. In response to questions about what kind of impact the fire might have had on the execution drugs and the area where they are stored, Amanda Hernandez, a TDCJ spokeswoman, replied, "TDCJ has viable execution drugs available. According to a copy of a Huntsville Fire Department report included in the lawsuit, a prison guard and a fire captain entered the burning building to check on the pharmacy. But as they approached the third floor, they had to evacuate because the area was about to be overtaken by fire. When pentobarbital is exposed to high temperatures, it can quickly degrade, compromising its chemical structure and impacting its potency, the lawsuit said. This creates substantial risks of serious, severe, and superadded harm and pain, according to the lawsuit. But in an order issued Friday evening, U.S. District Judge Robert Pittman denied Murphy's request to stay his execution, saying the test results of the pentobarbital samples undermine Murphy's claims that all of TDCJ's execution drugs were damaged in the fire. As a result, Murphy's claim that the so-called fire-blighted pentobarbital is sure or very likely to cause serious illness or suffering is meritless. Murphy's lawyers also alleged the Criminal Justice Department is using expired execution drugs, a claim made by 7 other death row inmates in a December lawsuit. Pittman said there was no validity to these claims as well, and there was nothing to support Murphy's allegations that TDCJ's current execution method is sure or very likely to cause needless suffering and illness. In responding to Murphy's lawsuit, the Texas Attorney General's office submitted a laboratory report of test results completed in late September of 2 pentobarbital samples. One sample had a potency level of 94.2%, while the other was found to be 100% potent. Both samples also passed sterility tests and had acceptable levels of bacterial toxins, according to the report. The lab report also undermines Murphy's claim that TDCJ is improperly using expired drugs in its executions. The defendant's testing shows that, even if Murphy's allegation that the drugs are expired is true, which it is not, they remain potent and sterile, the Attorney General's office wrote in its response. Murphy's lawsuit is the latest challenge in recent years to Texas's execution procedures. In the December 2022 lawsuit filed by the 7 death row inmates, a civil judge in Austin preliminarily agreed with their claims. But her order was stopped by Texas's top criminal appeals court. 5 of the inmates have since been executed, even though the lawsuit remains pending. In 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled, in response to a lawsuit from a Texas death row inmate, that states must accommodate the requests of death row inmates who want to have their spiritual advisors pray aloud and touch them during their executions. Even though no expert had testified that Murphy's damaged mental health made him too dangerous to be allowed to live, the prosecutors argued that it did. The jury based its sentence on a prediction that he would continue to be violent. Yet over the 22 years he has been on death row, this has categorically been shown to be false, Dershowitz said. The judge told the jury they had to be sure beyond a reasonable doubt that he would commit further violent acts. 3 years before Murphy committed his crime, a woman named Cheryl Wilhelm was carjacked in Arlington, about 75 miles from Murphy's home and place of work in Wills Point. When she saw TV coverage of his arrest, she called police and thought that he had been the man who attacked her and stole her vehicle. Murphy had never been investigated, much less charged, for this crime. But during the punishment phase of his trial, the prosecutor claimed that he had committed it, and that this was critical evidence of his likely continuing dangerousness. Over the years, evidence has emerged that suggests he cannot have done so. In this period he had a steady job at a computer technology company, and on the day of the carjacking clocked in for a night shift at 11:54 p.m. After stealing Wilhelm's car, the perpetrator drove it further away from Wills Point, eventually abandoning it in Wichita Falls after robbing another woman, who according to the police was attacked at 8:24 p.m. Wichita Falls is 3 hours and 15 minutes drive in favorable traffic from Wills Point, meaning that if Murphy had an accomplice, it would, theoretically, just have been possible to get into that person's vehicle after the attack and travel to work. But no evidence that he did has ever been put forward, which leaves a huge unanswered question. If Murphy took Wilhelm's car, how did he return to Wills Point? After he was sentenced, Murphy's condition slowly stabilized. He formed a loving relationship with a woman, a retired publisher whom he calls his wife. The state of Texas executed Jedidiah Murphy by lethal injection Tuesday, October 10, 2023, for the carjacking murder of a 79-year-old Garland woman in 2000. Lawyers for Murphy, 48, had filed multiple requests in state and federal court to have his execution postponed because of issues with execution drugs and DNA testing of evidence. In his final words recorded by TDCJ, Murphy expressed remorse. To the family of the victim, I want to say I sincerely apologize for all I did, he said. I hope this brings you closure, thank you. He then recited a version of Psalm 34 of the New Testament, and another verse from the Bible. Murphy was convicted in 2001 for shooting and killing Bertie Lee Cunningham after forcing her to give him a ride at gunpoint. Thank you for watching Death Row.